So this is an introduction to meet Sipho Mabona, who is a Swiss national. I met him, first of all, maybe 7 or 8 years ago in Italy. I think I first met you. But he's got quite a history already in origami as being really a leading artist. And this is an opportunity really for us to find out a bit more about his philosophies and his ideas. So tell us about your introduction to origami. What was your first steps in the world of origami?
Right, so I started with the paper airplanes, and then when I was 18, 19, I started with origami because I was running out of designs to fold, and I was just fascinated by it from the get-go. And I was folding other people's designs in the beginning, and after a couple of years I started folding my own designs.
When you developed from paper aeroplanes, your next step was what? Super complex? There seems to be, for me, when the young enthusiast goes through, he wants to fold the most elaborate thing he can possibly do. Did you follow that route?
Yeah, kind of. That was my route. Well, basically, first I started to fold. I mean, you start folding. I guess I progressed pretty quickly because I've been folding for so many years. Not origami, but just exercise. So I got to pretty complex models pretty soon. Yeah. But yeah, I tried to fold complex models. But actually, I never, because when I was folding from instructions, I think the only book that I could get a hold of that had really complex stuff was Robert Lang's Origami Insects or something like that. I never got to fold all these Japanese creators' crazy stuff, but I would have if I had had a chance. But when I started creating my own stuff, it was really like I started creating as soon as I was able to do goal-oriented designs, I started to create a really intricate stuff. I started with insects and stuff that took me anywhere from 10 to 20 hours, folding time to complete.
And do you find that as you're maturing, that you're more interested in more elemental, more fundamental designs and the engineering? You're getting away from that? I think that seems to be a trend.
Yes, I'm getting away from it very much so, because I think in general with the complex stuff, it's more about the engineering, and it's about getting all the parts in and all that kind of stuff, and it's not so much about the the sequential folding and making things nicely. And if you want to do installations like I do with so many pieces, first of all, you don't want to do something that's really super boring to fold, and second of all, you don't want to take 10 hours to fold it if you're going to fold 150 of it. So it's kind of both, this complexity that you want to reduce and also the time that you want to spare.
So tell us about these installations that you do. So why do you do that?
Well, with the installations, I can show you some images that I've got here, because one piece here that is called Barely Surviving. I mentioned that earlier, I think, today with the ice bears that are laying on the floor. I'm trying to tell a story with this, and I think it's pretty obvious with this piece, what I was trying to say. And then another image of the same piece. And then I had at the same show I was showing this piece as well. This is one picture that I took at a new show that I was showing the same piece. This piece was called Invisible Foe. And I don't know, you can see it kind of, but the birds are actually, let me see. You see as the birds evolve and then finally crash into the plexiglass. So I mean, it's not so much about showing origami per se, but it's using the what you call it, the properties of origami to tell a story, because you have the flat sheet where you start and it evolves and then turns into a swallow, and then it ends up in that window. But you wouldn't be able to tell that whole transformative kind of process with any other art form than with origami. So that's where it's really unique in this case. And then you have this piece was called Away, and it's these are actually helium balloons, and they're actually floating. And the idea was the show was only up for 3 days, and I had wanted to fill the balloons so they eventually would start floating through space. Unfortunately, I filled in too much helium, so they didn't start floating through space. But they were really huge. They had like 1.50 meter diameter. Also here, this was more about people just following their heart or their dreams, and everybody, you know, having a different color or different idea. But also here, there were two things. First of all, the transformative aspect, which you have in the finished figure, because I think it kind of shows your personal process for everyone. And then also the prosperities of paper that I use, that it's lightweight and you can actually make that in a physical way to float. So those are some different aspects. So this is some new work. Then I had these guys here where I was also showing a little fight. Actually, I put that up in a show, which was supposed to be up for a month. And the gallerist took it down after the first day because she was too scared about people breaking into the place because there's actually money. And you had all the beggars and people at the windows looking inside, and she got really scared. And it wasn't a really big gallery, so she didn't want to show it any longer, which was kind of unfortunate. I think it speaks for itself. And this was another piece. Actually, here the case was, it was a studio exhibition of a friend of mine, and he was asking me to put up a piece that would fit that space. So I got into that space, and I saw this space, and that, you know, it kind of hit me that I would have to do something in the direction of this piece, which was called Levitation. And I was inspired by the fact that I don't know how it's in Britain, but in Switzerland, suicide is quite an issue, and I think it's one of the countries with the highest suicide rates. And I've known not very close friends, but people who committed suicide, and I was just trying to, you know, to reflect on the moment, because I remember one night I was at a former girlfriend's house, and her brother had a good friend, and we got this call, and he didn't actually want to take this call because I don't know why, but I had a strange feeling when the phone call came in. And then later on, the same person called again, and his mom was pick up the phone, and he picked it up. And this lady was telling him that one of his best friends had committed suicide. And I remembered that moment as being so surreal. And I just felt like the way of portraying this person seemingly levitating in the air would be like such a surreal experience if you saw somebody levitating in the air. And it's just like I wanted to reflect on that surreal and really, terrible feeling that you have when you get that kind of message. So, but what the strange thing was, in retrospective also, the guy that was having that studio told me that everybody who had worked in that studio insisted on the fact that they couldn't work in there for too many hours, and everybody felt that it was haunted in some way, which was really weird. And here also I had this, so what happened was I'd heard about money bill folding, and I had seen some tessellations done with dollar bills. And then I heard about, you know, when the economic crisis was, I heard about the Heuschrecken, the locusts, that a German politician, Müntefering, was calling the private equities and investment banks Heuschrecken, because they just go everywhere, blow things up, blew companies up, dropped them, and moved on. So he called them Heuschrecken. And I saw the parallel between this, of obviously the money and the Heuschrecken as a, you know, as a object, but then also thought, you know, there was a parallel to the biblical plague, where you have the locusts as being a biblical plague, and the question is, why was the biblical plague? Not that I'm particularly religious, but in the Bible, the idea was that the plague was brought upon us because of our misbehavior, and now, you know, kind of, you could also argue that this whole kind of capitalism that we're following is also the reason why we're running into these kind of problems. So, and then also there's this transformative aspect that I like to bring in, because in this case you have money, and money per se isn't bad. I mean, you pay your bills with money, you do lots of good things with money, you can buy food, whatever, but it's what you make out of the money which turns it into what it is. So it's actually in your power. So in some ways it's kind of, you could see it as a negative thing, but then you can also see see it in a positive way, because you can have the idea of hope, concept of hope in this piece, because you could actually fold that dollar bill into anything else but a locust. So you could also unfold the locust and really transform it into something else. And there are tons of other meanings that you can see in this piece. So this is one of my favorite pieces.
So what about your relationship with the art world? It seems like you're fairly well established in this. You have a gallery that looks after you, or a number?
To be quite frank, I have a museum that shows a lot of my pieces. I've shown in many museums, but actually I'm only having my first gallery show this November. So I'm so established. I have quite a bit of feedback when I do stuff as far as press and stuff goes, but I think I'm really only getting into that kind of gallery environment now.
So I think, from my small experience, an artist has to be self-promotional. Do you go out of your way to promote yourself?
I'm a master of self-promotion. No, quite frankly, I do self-promote, and I think it's quintessential if you want to be. I mean, you can get super lucky and you can not promote yourself and be successful as an artist, but I think it's quintessential. And I always try to tell. I get to do quite a bit of workshops with art students too, and I'm always trying to push them to promote themselves on social media and internet, because and they don't like doing that. Artsy people think that, even more than probably we, but very artsy, like art school people, think that the internet and social media is so uncool. So they're kind of very standoffish. But I try to explain that if I hadn't put my stuff on the internet, I would be folding in my back room, in some back room in Lucerne probably, and nobody would know about my work. And it was only because I put my stuff on the internet that people discovered it. And it's the same thing now. I'm getting these shows because people see blogs that are blogging about my work. And I make connections to those press people, to the blog people, and I feed them my press releases. Mm-hmm. It's not like they come and ask for them. Sometimes that happens, but it's rarely the case.
Mm-hmm. So you're in control of your destiny to a certain extent.
Yes, I think I am, yeah.
And you push it forward actively. I mean, when I think of dear old Eric Joisel, he was a great origami artist, but he wasn't great at promoting himself, and he struggled, you know, in many levels. Anyway, so what about your what do you see for the future in your origami work? Have you got any specific ideas where you want to direct your work, or you follow your nose?
It's kind of both. I've been noticing that I don't want to. One of the key aspects to my work is that I must be. I think the work can only be good if I'm happy with what I'm doing, and I can't be doing something that I'm bored with. So I'm always looking for new challenges. So with new projects, I'm also trying to kind of branch out of origami. I see origami as a starting point, and I think it should be some kind of, reference I make in my work to origami, because it is my kind of heritage. But I'm trying to work with paintings for my new show. I'm trying to work with ceramics mostly. I'm not doing any representational pieces in my new show. And I'm always trying to add to, like the aspect of that conceptual background, and kind of making the work deeper and deeper in that kind of area.
So what about we talked a little bit this morning about ceramics. Mm-hmm. So can you tell us a bit more about that?
Okay, yeah. Let me pull out some images because it makes it a lot easier. Just one thing I wanted to show, because you were still saying, and then I'll get to the ceramics, sure. What you were saying about before. So this is some of my newer work. I don't know if you guys recognize what it is. I think it's an image of. It's a mix. So here you can see where I have my origami heritage and my actual heritage both in this image. So I just want to explain some layers that I'm working with in this piece. I mean, I wouldn't explain this at an art show, but I think it's nice to understand for people who come from the origami world that I'm trying to branch out in a different way. And in this case, I took a crease pattern, which is a crease pattern of my human figures that you saw earlier with the balloon, and it's kind of a generic human being. and I said, okay, so we're generic, we have this basis, we're all human beings, and then I superimposed this image of Nelson Mandela on top of it. And in this case, I superimposed it, and I was trying to say what I say is you're kind of, you're part of what you are as a human in general, but then the other part is what you make out of it. It's your biography, and that's superimposed. But it's using the same colors, so you don't really see where is the beginning and the end of this structure. So they're kind of intertwining, and it's hard to tell where it starts and where it ends. And then you can. Then there are also so many layers. The color is referencing to the tribe Nelson Mandela. He's from the same tribe as my dad is, Xhosa, and their color is orange, so that's the orange. And then there's also this duality with always when you make a decision, that's either mountain or valley fold, so it's white or orange, so that decides your biography. So there are many references you can make in such an image. And then this is an image of Kanye West, and why I used Kanye West was because I just used all kinds of types of people that I kind of for some time looked at as not a role model, but I looked up to in some way. And I always loved his music, although I think he's an idiot now, but but I still like his music. But here I brought in another aspect because I also like the work, I don't know if you're familiar with it, of Jean-Michel Basquiat. He's like an African-American artist in the late 20th century, and he used to reference to also famous African Americans, and he used to add a little crown because he said they're kings, they crowned themselves by what they did. And I wanted to bring that aspect, so I chose leaf gold to represent this kind of royal aspect. So there are always several layers, and this is ceramics to make a kind of a link to what I'm going to be talking about now.
So you make these things yourself?
Yes.
And this is quite a departure from origami. You're using origami concepts as well as other deeper ideas, but you're having to learn about other techniques apart from just folding paper, aren't you?
Yes.
And you find you're inspired by that?
Very much so.
What do you enjoy doing this? Obviously.
Yes, I mean. I also enjoyed origami for its craftsmanship and also learning new techniques. It's also always kind of craftsmanship. And that's why I enjoy using new techniques like acrylic, like gold leafing and all that kind of stuff. So that's why I really enjoy doing these kind of things. So you see, I kind of make these crease patterns, and then I reinforce them with, I put them on some, plastic, and then I reinforce them with different kind of materials, and then I put them into this frame, and then I pour silicone on top of them, and then basically once it has hardened, you can take it out and you have a silicone mold, and you get this out of it, which looks, if you look at it, it looks exactly the same. You see every tiny crease and wrinkle in it, and you can't really tell. And then I've also started adding several pieces together, so adding different kind of materials, different coloring.
This is really beautiful. I love this gold, the gold and the white particularly.
Right here, yeah. So,
and it's interesting the concept of the crease pattern, which is, you know, the lazy origami artist's way of showing how to fold the model. If you happen to have the skill to be able to reconstruct it, but here Sipho is using it as an actual work of art in itself. I think others have explored this, like Robert Lang, haven't they?
Yes. We always try to freeze in the moment. We can't live with the ephemeral. We always want to stick with things. We have images of our puppies, of our children. We can't let go of things. And in Buddhism or in the Eastern, tradition, it's all about letting things go, letting things flow, about the ephemeral and all that kind of thing. So in this piece, I'm actually taking what was a transformative aspect, you know, something that was actually supposed to be transformed, and I'm freezing it in. So that's why I'm also playing with these new materials in a new show that I'm going to be putting up. It's also going to be a lot about the decay of the pieces. So the commercial work sometimes is very inspiring, and in this case it was, because I was the Tropenmuseum in Amsterdam had asked me to do a large-scale installation, You can see the images. And I had to design this bird within 2 weeks that would be able to fill the whole place, this huge hall. And I had to kind of design something. But, you know, the whole, you know, being confronted with the problem kind of gives you new inspiration, and it shows you new techniques and stuff that you can work with in other projects. So I always think that commercial work can also be very inspirational. So like, you see the kind of original sheets I had. That was the installation in the beginning. And you see some of the kids folding their own things. And then this was, I think, midway through the project, and I'm still waiting for images from when it's finished. But you see all the ones that I made and all the ones that the spectators, all the visitors have made.
Great, great. So we've talked quite a bit. Anybody got any questions for Sipho?
Sipho, do you have an art? Did you study art at college?
No, I didn't study art at college, and it's funny that you asked this because I just recently had a discussion with somebody who studied art at the Royal Academy, and and we were discussing, and he said, well, you know, I said, you know, I think in some points it's a disadvantage. It's a disadvantage if you want to start getting into the art world if you haven't studied art. If you're following the what you call in social psychology foot in the door technique, it's kind of hard if you don't have this artist degree, because once you stick your foot in the door, the guy at the door is going to look and say, oh, show me your papers. So you have to use the back door and, you know, kind of bang through the back door to get in there. So I feel like I'm doing that, but also it gives you a whole different approach, because in Switzerland the approach of fine art is it can't be aesthetic. Like if you look at contemporary Swiss artists, all their art you won't discover any sense of aesthetics. So everything is kind of similar. You can kind of tell, oh, this is Swiss art of the early 21st century because it's just trashy, hipster kind of stuff. And then if you're doing the kind of stuff that I'm doing, it's kind of a mix, because you have to be careful that it's not purely aesthetic, that you're also telling a story, but you have a whole different approach. So in some way you can also kind of differentiate yourself from many of the contemporary artists by a whole different approach. So it's kind of a disadvantage in one way, but also an advantage in another way, I think.
Do you have any help folding, or would you just do it all yourself?
Good question. In the beginning I used to do everything by myself in the first few installations, but I just realized that it just doesn't make sense to do everything by yourself. One problem is that, I mean, the locusts were super complicated to fold, so you can only have people that put on clips and stuff, but I always try to work with assistants because it can get pretty nerve-wracking if you do everything by yourself.
Yeah, we get these the occasional requests for promotional material, don't we, in the origami world? Can you provide 500 hedgehogs by?
6,000 rein.
Yeah. And they've come up, usually people reject the commissions because it's just time consuming. But haven't you used casting, your ceramic techniques to fulfill this requirement?
Yes, I've used casting to do, well actually I did resin casting of some stuff. Maybe I have some images in front. So it looks pretty convincing. Usually people can't tell that it's a cast until they get a hold of it, and it's like kind of heavy, huh? So.
The $6 million question for me is that I don't know any origami artists yet, who make a living other than through commercial work, producing things for adverts and what have you. Very few people, even like Eric, he couldn't sell his masterpieces. Do you think that you will be able to actually sell your ceramics or your molds? Do you see that?
Well, I actually have started selling quite a bit of the work, and it's just been picking up quite a bit since I did that elephant project. So I think I'm confident that it will in the future, because I just started doing the ceramic casts of, for instance, the 50 by 50 centimeter tiles, and I've only posted them on Facebook, and I've sold a few of them without even having started the show actually. So.
But you also rely on other commercial commissions, like commercials, mm-hmm. like the ASICs was a big thing for you, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. Can you talk about that for a few minutes?
Well, the ASIC thing was actually what got me started off, and that's why I'm always telling people that they should put stuff on the internet, because I had it on Passion Origami site. I had this this octopus of mine, and one day this this art director called me and was saying, "Oh, can we use your octopus for an advertisement?" And back then I had only started designing, so I was like, "Oh yeah, sure." It was a great honor, and I didn't charge a lot. But then they were like, "We'd like to also have some other stuff," so they asked me to fold a tiger for them. And I gave it a try, and I couldn't come up with a solution. I kept unfolding the whole night because I wanted to see it the next day. I went to bed without having a solution about 3 a.m. And then when I got up about 6 a.m. because I wanted to finish it the next day, I was like, yeah, I have the solution. And I folded it. I showed them the image. They were like, oh, that's pretty cool. They were like, okay, could you fold the pagoda? And I said, I haven't done that, but you can give it a try. And it was exactly the same story. I showed it to them, and then they were like, okay, could you do the rest of the models? And I ended up doing about 20 pieces, and we shot about, I was working for about 6 weeks ahead of the shoot. Then we shot 2 weeks doing the stop motion, and I was consulting all the CGI stuff they were doing. And then they took about 4 more months in post-production. And fortunately, the whole thing won a lot of prizes, so I kept on getting commissions. But I must say, I'm really happy to have done that, and it's been quite inspirational. But I must say that I'm striving towards the direction that Nick was asking me about earlier, to be like a full-time fine artist and to no more have to rely on those commercial commissions.
Because unfortunately, in these situations, you're having to work very strictly to order, aren't you? You haven't got a free rein to do what you want. You're having to say that you're having to do a tiger, a pagoda, etc., which is very. You're not able to follow your nose.
Yeah, no, that's true. The only thing that's a benefit, if you've been doing it for a little longer, you get to tell the advertising agents, we got to do it this way because I've done it so many times and we can't do it. So please listen to what I have to say, because when you're just starting off, they're just going to be bullying you around. And
we found that, haven't we? Thank you very much, Sipho.
Thanks,
It's been a
Dave.
real pleasure.